Cast iron and corbelling. It's used frequently on balconies, which you see examples at the top left and the top right. It's used in ornamental work, such as the bracket that's holding up the balcony underneath the picture on the top left. It's used sometimes for horizontal support members. Instead of wood, sometimes they use iron, similar to a beam that we'd have today, and so that top middle shows that, but it's ornate with different kinds of designs, rectangular and circular designs. The two to the left and right in the center are also cast iron capitals. They are structural members, but they're decorative to make it look like they're classical type cast capitals. It's not strictly a identifiable motif, but it has acanthus leaves on decorating it, which suggests one of the classical orders of architecture from ancient Greece. When you come down to the bottom, the center slide is obviously a doorway. It's framed by what you call cast iron columns, which can become very ornate. You can see in those columns, not only do they have a base, but they have fluted different ways of expressing details. To the left is brickwork, which is corbelled, which means that brick kind of goes in and out to create a design using shadows to bring out specific designs. And this is pretty typical of that period. I believe this building dates from around the turn of the 20th century, which was kind of the height of the Victorian era, and Victorians were very exuberant in their stylistic preferences. That went from buildings to interior design to clothing that they wore. Styles kind of go in waves, and what you eat and what you wear and how you live is all kind of interconnected. And this building is somewhat ornate. It's a very fine, very nice structure on Upper Broad Street in downtown Augusta, and expresses design and interest, and also the materials that were available at the time for the architect and the contractor and the owner to come together and create a building that was attractive and obviously would attract customers to this location. Today, buildings are often built without chimneys, or they are not intricately designed to be part of the building. And when a building is restored these days, it always is distasteful to me when they remove the chimney, because it's part of the design element, it's part of the silhouette, the profile. And chimney design and fireplace design evolved over the centuries. We don't need it as much anymore, but now it's kind of a luxury rather than a necessity. It used to be that they were required to heat a house or to create energy. What you've got here, the one in the top left is, I guess that's octagonal in shape. And again, the corbelling comes in here, the stepped out and then stepped back in, that's known as corbelling, to create a brick pattern. Taller chimneys tended to draw better. They were also designed to be above the roof line because you wanted any sparks to go up high and not settle on your roof and cause a fire. Your center slide here is probably our most famous chimney. That is the last remaining feature of the Confederate States Powder Works that was built during the Civil War to supply gunpowder to the Confederate Army. It's a very tall chimney and has in recent years been restored. It was left there, although there were many buildings that were built along 2 miles of the Augusta Canal. That's the last remaining structure still standing that was part of the Confederate States Powder Works. When the rest of the buildings were torn down by the federal government, who had confiscated all this because it had been Confederate property, a plea was made to preserve that chimney as a memorial to the Confederacy, and that request was granted and still stands. The Confederate Powder Works chimney is just this shaft. Everything behind it is part of the Sibley Mill. The Gertrude Herbert, when at top right, is a Federal-style fanlight door. The fanlight is the transom at the top that gives light to the interior of the building over the door, and then on the sides, the row of windows down the side of the opening is called side lights. And that is the Gertrude Herbert building, which is also known as Ware's Folly, is really one of the most elegant historic buildings in the state of Georgia. It's considered one of the finest, probably the finest federal style house in the state of Georgia. It's a real gem, a jewel. The photo to the middle left is a building on James Brown Boulevard or 9th Street, built by the Dowdy family as an investment property in the 1880s. It actually originally housed a laundry on the first floor, and the upper stories were residential, and often they were occupied by the people that ran the laundry. This particular door is what's known as a Roman arch. If you take a circle and cut it in two and just use the top of the circle and then it goes straight down on either side, that's a Roman arch. Another interesting thing about this is it's what has come to be known as an Augusta door, widely known as a perspective door, and it's where it angles in from the outside edge. The woodwork angles into the door. This one probably had a fan light over the door, which has been closed in, but it doesn't have side lights. Those panels coming down the side create the effect of the side lights. But they're different forms of these Augusta doors or perspective doors, but this is a particularly ornate one. The one in the middle appears to be the Lutheran Church on Green Street, the front door to that. Lutheran churches are known for their red front doors, which represent Martin Luther. This particular door is what you would call collegiate or ecclesiastical Gothic. A Gothic arch is one that points. It's a pointed arch. In the 20th century, when this building was built in the early 1920s, it was very popular in both academic and in religious architecture to make this stylized type of Gothic arch. The overall design of the Lutheran Church is a Gothic style. The row of doors on the right is on the old fire station headquarters building, which is on Broad Street. And as you can see, those doors look like carriage doors because back in 1907, when this building was constructed, the fire engines were still being pulled by horses. They were still in the carriage house type design for fire stations as opposed to a garage type design a bit later on, usually double doors. So those are very interesting doors. Again, I see some of the same cast iron elements. Cast iron is the base of a cast iron column. I think that's probably part of a cast iron column, and maybe this is too. Then you've got other features. Top left, you've got the cornice with what these are known as modillions, and then those are dental molding or dental work. And then you've even got a garland motif on the frieze. Create a full entablature to crown a building. Over the windows you have the center keystone, but there's a lot of detail. You've got this round vent window. You can even see a little cast iron decorative feature in the center, and that was to give ventilation to the building, to keep the air moving, which is always good for a building. Keep the varmints out and keep the air moving. This matrix photograph shows the Confederate monument on Broad Street in the 700 block. In the center photograph, unique because the four statues on the bottom are generals, but far above there's another statue of a private. It was built in 1878 and dedicated in 1878, and it's considered unique among Confederate monuments because of that powerful are at the bottom and the weak are at the top. A couple of these buildings are early tall buildings, or particularly large buildings in the 700 block of Broad Street. The one in the center left is known as the Lamar Building. It is Sullivan-esque in style, which is an ornate design to the exterior of the building. This is even more unique because the top is the penthouse, which was designed by the internationally famous architect I.M. Pei in the 1970s. The one on the right is a little older than the Lamar Building. It's known as the Marion Building. This is the right center. And it is more of a Renaissance revival style, although it does have some Sullivan-esque features on it. It's interesting to me because it's a half of a building. You can see on the right seems to be more or less unfinished, and that's because when it was built, the intention was to build half of it and then come back and build the other half, but that never occurred. The building in the center, bottom row, is the News Building. All of these were built in the 19-teens, and this is a very high-style Sullivan-esque building. It shows a bit more of a close-up so you can see that decorative motif along the walls. And then you can also see the wide overhanging eave. Come down to the bottom left, you see the First Baptist Church, which is Beaux-Arts in style. Very fine, round copper dome on the top. The Imperial Theater, which is on the north side of the 700 block, you see in the center top. It's another Sullivan-esque design. You also see the marquee, which is a reproduction that was put on just in recent years that looks very similar, almost identical to the original marquee. The only difference is this one is electronic. The bottom right is from the Miller Theater, which is on the south side of the 700 block of Broad Street, and it's an interior feature. It was an Art Moderne style building, which is very streamlined, very modern, and I'm sure this was considered very chic and risque for them to put naked ladies dancing. This is 8th Street between Reynolds Street and the Riverwalk. This was the first focus of Riverwalk and downtown revitalization back in the 1980s. This area has been known often as Cotton Road. Most of the businesses that faced this area of 8th Street were related to cotton. They were either cotton brokers or there were cotton warehouses, businesses that related to buying and selling of cotton. But you've always heard that in the southern U.S., cotton was king, and that was particularly true in Augusta. Augusta was the second largest inland cotton market in the world, second only to Memphis, Tennessee. There was more cotton bought and sold in port cities like Charleston and Savannah and New Orleans and some other coastal cities. But in terms of being up the river, Augusta was dominated by cotton, and it sold the second most of any other city in the world other than Memphis. Before the levee was built, which was in the teens, it led right down to the river. There was another street under the levee. And of course today there's a breach in the levee that was designed as part of Riverwalk, so you still can go straight and you see the river ahead of you. Probably the finest stairway, the most impressive stairway in Augusta, certainly, and pretty much far and wide, Ware's Folly, or the Gertrude Herbert Institute of Art. It's an elliptical stairway that starts on the ground floor and winds all the way up to the first, second, and the attic story. So it's a 4-story stairs. And as you can see in these photographs, you can look straight up and down. And it's very fine. It's mahogany balusters and railings. Just a very elegant, graceful, seemingly floating stairway. Up at the top photograph on the left and the right are a place that many people probably don't have an opportunity to see. This is the stairs that lead up first to the balcony level at the entrance, or the narthex of St. Paul's Episcopal Church on Reynolds Street. Stairs on the left continue up, and they go up into the bell tower and go all the way to the top of the bell tower. Stairs often lead to interesting and more or less secret places. The Morris Museum stairway, again, is intended as an elegant entryway into the museum from the ground floor to the second floor, where the main body of the museum is housed. The one in the center photograph is a very utilitarian stairs. That's actually a fire escape. It descends to nowhere. That's because it's designed to go down. If there is a fire, there's a mechanism to allow that to go to the ground so that people can get out of a building. This one is on Ellis Street, which is kind of a back street. It's not really considered a main street. Collection of various types of windows. The one in the center, second row, right in the center, is a large, elegant arched window. That elegant arched window is on the center front on the facade of St. Paul's Church. It burned in 1916, and this building replaced the one that burned in the teens. The multi-pane windows that you see on older buildings, the original 1820 building was in an era when you couldn't get large panes of glass. They just didn't have the technology to make them, and they would often break. So that's why you see the multi-panes of glass on the oldest buildings. But then you see on the right, Gertrude Herbert. That was actually built about the same time, but they spared no expense. And so those are a bit larger size windows on either side, the panes themselves. St. Paul's was a Georgian design, which was a little bit retardataire, and even in 1820, federal style Ware's Folly, or Gertrude Herbert, was modern. It was up to date. It was the latest thing. So maybe the size of the windows reflected that. Right above it on the top right is Old Academy of Richmond County building on Telfair Street. Again, you see the 6/6 multi-pane windows. This is a Tudor Gothic style building. You can see the battlements at the top of the wall, and you can see this tracery, which is pretty thick masonry that's made to create a design around the windows. Reminds you of the Tudor style from England, which was popular at the time. The center top photograph is the Lutheran Church of the Resurrection on Green Street, again, Gothic style. So you have Tudor Gothic, and then you have academic or ecclesiastical Gothic. You've got kind of a retardataire Georgian style with the center window from St. Paul's and the Federal era windows of Where's Folly. The center bottom window is the late 19th century, about 1884. This is the building on 9th Street or James Brown Boulevard, built by the Dowdy family as an investment and used early on as Chinese laundry. These windows, however, are not original windows. That building had fallen on hard times, and it is under renovation at this time, under our direction actually, to some degree, and those are replacement windows, but the idea was that they're very similar to what would have been there. To the left and the right, you've got the Morris Museum windows, or building again. On the right at the bottom, although this building has some older motifs that make it appear to be a more historic structure or design, the windows are a giveaway. See how flat they are. Historically, windows would be set back from the wall and create cavities. Had a practical purpose to keep the water dripping away from the window to keep it from going inside. Bottom left is an arched window in the Morris Museum gallery. It's a half-circle Roman arch, but just the arch itself. Here, that's just purely decorative to give you the idea that there is a fan light there in this very large window. So with the advancement of building technology, we don't always need the structural members that we had in the past, but yet they're pleasing to the eye, so they're often attached, but they're superficial, they're not real, they don't have a real structural purpose.